Greetings, I am Gresham's and welcome back to Gresham Reads Graceling by Christine Cashore. I would like to apologize for last week. As you saw from the notification video uploaded, Darkus's voice was not well enough to properly record this, but now he is feeling much better. So, without any further ado, let us continue. Right, just a little bit higher. Yes, I believe that should be good. Chapter 12. The next morning, Randa came to their practice for the first time. He stood at the side so that everyone in the room was compelled to stand as well and watch him instead of the fighters they'd come to see. Katsa was glad to fight, glad for the excuse to ignore him, except that she couldn't ignore him. He was so tall and broad, and he stood against the white wall in bright blue robes. His lazy laugh carried. Excuse me. His lazy laugh carried into every corner of the room. She couldn't shake the sense of him, and there must be something he wanted. He never sought out his lady killer unless there was something he wanted. She had been running through a drill with Poe when Randa had arrived, a drill that was giving her some trouble. It began with Katsa on her knees, and Poe behind her, pinning her arms behind her back. Her task was to break free of Poe's grip and then grapple with him until she had trapped him in the same position. She could always fight her way free of Poe's grip, but that wasn't the problem. It was the counterpin that frustrated her. Even if she managed to knock him to his knees and trap his arms, she couldn't keep him down. It was a matter of brute strength. If he tried to muscle himself to his feet, she didn't have the force to stop him, not unless she knocked him unconscious or injured him seriously. And that wasn't the point of the exercise. She needed to find a holding position that would make the effort of rising too painful to be worth his while. They began the drill again. She knelt with Poe at her back, and Poe's hands tightened around her wrists. Randa's voice rose and fell, and one of the stewards responded, flattering and fawning. Everyone flattered Randa. Katsa was ready for Poe this time. She twisted out of his grip and was on him like a wildcat. She pummeled his stomach, hooked her feet between his legs, and battered him to his knees. She yanked his arms, his right shoulder, the one he was always icing. She twisted his right arm and leaned all her weight against it, so that any attempt to move would require him to wrench his shoulder and bring more pain to it than she had already caused him to feel. "I surrender," he gasped. She released him and he heaved himself to his feet. He massaged his shoulder. "Good work, Katsa." Again. They ran through the drill again, and then once more. And both times she trapped him easily. "You've got it," Poe said. "Good. What next? Shall I try it?" Her name cut through the air then, and her hackles rose. She'd been right. He hadn't come only to watch, and now, before all these people, she must act pleasant and civil. She fought against the frown that rose to her face and turned to the king. "It's so amusing. Randa said, to see you struggling against an opponent, Katsa. I'm glad it gives you amusement, Lord King. Prince Greening, how do you find our Lady Killer? She's a superior fighter by far, Lord King, Poe said. If she didn't hold herself back, I'd be in great trouble. Randa laughed. Indeed, I've noticed it's you who comes to dinner with bruises, not she. Pride in his possession, Katsa forced herself to unclench her fists. She forced herself to breathe, to hold her uncle's gaze. Even though she wanted to scratch the leer from his face. Katsa, the king said, come to me later today. I have a job for you. Yes, Lord King, she said. Thank you, Lord King. Randa leaned back on his heels and surveyed the room. Then, with his stewards rushing into their places behind him, he exited with a great swish of blue robes, and Katsa stared after him until he and his entourage had vanished. And then she stared at the door the steward slammed behind him. Around the room, slowly, lords and soldiers sat down. Katsa was vaguely aware of their movements. Vaguely aware of Poe's eyes on her face, watching her silently. She knew what she wanted. She felt it shooting down her arms and into her fingers, tingling in her legs and feet. A straight fight, she said. Anything fair until one of us surrenders. Poe narrowed his eyes. He considered her tight fists and her hard mouth. We'll have that fight, but we'll have it tomorrow. We're done for today. No, we fight. Katsa, we're done. She stalked up to him, close, so that no one else could hear. What's the matter, Poe? Do you fear me? Yes, I fear you, as I should when you're angry. I won't fight you when you're angry, nor should you fight me when I'm angry. That's all the purpose of these practices. And when he told her she was angry, she realized it was true, and just as quickly her anger fizzled into despair. Randa would send her on another strong-arm mission. He would send her to hurt some poor petty criminal. Some fool who deserved to keep his fingers, even if he was dishonorable. He would send her, and she must go, for the power sat with him. She ate in her dining room. They ate in her dining room. Katsa stared at her plate. He was talking about his brothers, and how his brothers would love to see their practices. She must come to Lionhead one day and fight with him for his family. They'd be amazed by her skill, and they'd honor her greatly. And he could show her the most beautiful sights in his father's city. She wasn't listening. She was picturing the arm she'd broken for her uncle. The arms bent the wrong way at the elbow, bones splintered, sticking through the skin. He said something about his shoulder, and she shook herself and looked at him. What did you say? She asked. About your shoulder? I'm sorry. He dropped his gaze and fiddled with his fork. Your uncle has quite an effect on you, he said. You haven't been yourself since you walked into the practice room. Or maybe I have been myself, and the other times I am not myself. What do you mean? My uncle thinks me savage. He thinks me a killer. Well, isn't he right? Didn't I become savage when you entered the room? And what is it we're practicing every day? She tore apart a piece of bread and threw it under her plate. She glared at her meal. I don't believe you're savage, he said. She sighed sharply. You haven't seen me with Randa's enemies. He raised his cup to his lips and drank, then lowered it, watching her. What will he ask you to do this time? She pushed the fire down that rose up from her stomach. She wondered what would happen if she slammed her plate on the ground. How many pieces it would break into. It'll be some lord who owes him money, she said, or refused to agree to some bargain, or who looked at him wrong. I'll be told to hurt the man, enough so that he never dishonors my uncle again. And you'll do what he tells you to do? And you'll do what he tells you to do. Who are these fools who continue to resist Randa's will? Haven't they heard the stories? Don't they know he'll send me? Isn't it in your power to refuse? Poe asked. How can anyone force you to do anything? The fire burst into her throat and choked her. He is the king, and you're a fool too if you think I have choice in the matter. But you do have a choice. He's not the one who makes you savage. You make yourself savage when you bend yourself to his will. She sprang to her feet and swung at his jaw with the side of her hand. She lessened the force of his blow only at the last instant, when she realized he hadn't raised his arm to block her. Her hand hit his face with a sickening crack. She watched, horrified, as his chair toppled backward and his head slammed against the floor. She'd hit him hard. She knew she'd hit him hard, and he hadn't defended himself. She ran to him. He lay on his side, both hands over his jaw. A tear trickled from his eye, over his fingers and onto his floor. He grunted, or sobbed, she didn't know which. She knelt beside him and touched his shoulder. Did I break your jaw? Can you speak? He shifted then, pushed himself up to a sitting position. He felt at the side of his jaw and opened and closed his mouth. He moved his jaw left and right. I don't think it's broken. His voice was a whisper. She put her hand to his face and felt the bones under his skin. She felt the other side of his face to compare. She could tell no difference, and she caught her breath with relief. It's not broken. It's not broken, he said, though it seems it should be. I pulled back, she said, when I realized you weren't fighting me. She reached up to the table and dipped her hand into the water pitcher. She scooped blocks of ice into a cloth and rubbed them up. She brought the ice to his jaw. Why didn't you fight back? He held the ice to his face and groaned. This'll hurt for days. Poe. He looked at her and sighed. I told you before, Katza. I won't fight when you're angry. I won't solve disagreements between us with blows. He lifted the ice and fingered his jaw. He moaned and held the ice to his face again. What we do in practice rooms? That's to help each other. We don't use it against each other. We're friends, Katsa. Shame pricked behind her eyes. It was so elemental, so obvious. It wasn't what one friend did to another, yet she'd done it. We're too dangerous to each other, Katsa, and even if we weren't, it's not right. I'll never do it again, she said. I swear it. He caught her eyes then and held them. I know you won't, Katsa. Wildcat, don't blame yourself. You expected me to fight back. You wouldn't have struck me otherwise. But she still should have known better. It wasn't even you who angered me. It was him. Poe considered her for a moment. What do you think would happen, he said, if you refused to do what Randa ordered? She didn't know, really. She only imagined him sneering at her, his words crackling with contempt. If I don't do what he says, he'll become angry. When he becomes angry, I'll become angry, and then I'll want to kill him. He worked his mouth back and forth. You're afraid of your own anger. She stopped then and looked at him, because that seemed right to her. She was afraid of her own anger. But Randa isn't even worth your anger. He's nothing more than a bully. Katsa snorted. A bully who chops off people's fingers and breaks their arms. Not if you stop doing it for him, Poe said. Much of his power comes from you. She was afraid of her own anger. She repeated it in her mind. And with good reason. She was afraid of what she would do to the king, and with good reason. Look at Poe, his jaw red and beginning to swell. She'd learned to control her skill, but she hadn't learned to control her anger. And that meant she still didn't control her grace. Should we move back to the table, he said, for they were still sitting on the floor. You should probably go see Raph, she said. Just to be sure nothing's broken. Her eyes dropped. Forgive me, Poe. Poe heaved himself to his feet. He reached for her hand and pulled her up. You're forgiven, lady. She shook her head, disbelieving of his kindness. Shook her head, disbelieving of his kindness. You Lion are odd. Your reactions are never what mine would be. You, so calm when I've hurt you so badly. Your father's sister, so strange in her grief. Poe narrowed his eyes then. What do you mean? About what? Isn't the Queen of Monsea your father's sister? What's she done, my father's sister? The word is, she stopped eating when your heard of your grandfather's disappearance. You didn't know? And then she closed herself and her child in her rooms. And wouldn't let anyone enter, not even the king. She wouldn't let the king enter? He repeated, puzzlement in his voice. Nor anyone else, Katsa said, except a handmaiden to bring them meals. Why didn't no one tell me about this before? I assumed you knew, Poe. I had no idea it would matter so much to you. Are you close to her? Poe stared at the table, at the mess of melting ice in their half-eaten meal. His mind was elsewhere, his brow furrowed. Poe, what is it? He shook his head. It's not how I would have expected Ashen to behave. But it's no matter. He said, I must find Raffen or Ban. She watched his face then. There's something you're not telling me. He wouldn't meet her eyes. How long will you be away on Randa's errand? It's not likely to be more than a few days. When you return, I must speak with you. Why do you not speak with me now? He shook his head. I need to think. I need to work something out. Why were his eyes so uneasy? Why was he looking at the table and the floor, but never into her face? It was concern for his father's sister. It was worry for the people he cared about. For that was his way, this Lynid. His friendship was true. He looked at her then. The smallest of smiles flickered across his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. Don't feel too kindly towards me, Katsa. Neither of us is blameless as a friend. He left her then to find Raffen. She stood and stared at the place where he'd just been, and tried to shake off the eerie sense that he had just answered something she had thought, rather than something she had said. Curious. Forgive me, I'm just looking at the next chapter, and it appears that this chapter will be much longer. So, this episode will be much shorter. So, thank you all so much for listening in on chapter 12 of Graceling. The chapter was of decent length, but it seems that the next chapter will be much longer than this one, or the previous few that I have read. So it will be an episode all in itself, much like this. I do hope you've enjoyed the story. I'm finding this latest interaction between Katsa and Poe to be interesting. It appears that there is something Poe seems to be hiding. I believe his grace is not what it seems. Perhaps it is a form of mind reading. That last sentence kind of pointed at that. But I'm not entirely sure. Perhaps it is a form of mind reading, but not straight out. I mean, I can tell you if you want it, Gresham. No, I would rather find out for myself. Alright, fair enough. Though I will admit, it is interesting. I think you'll find his grace, as well as something coming in the near future, to be interesting. What do you mean? To quote a friend of mine, spoilers. Right. And of course. But I believe I will call the video here. I do hope you've enjoyed. And I will will see you all in the next video. If you enjoyed... Wait, I'm skipping a step. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and a comment down below telling your favorite part. And if you enjoy the content that Darkus and myself post to the channel, be sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you know when we upload. I will see you all in the next video. I am Gresham, and I am signing out.